Hi and welcome to another story. If you're enjoying Dob Entertainment and want even more, then check out my Patreon channel, patreon.com/James Dobinson. Link in the description. There you'll find full audiobooks for Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Lord of the Rings, Roald Dahl, David Walliams and many more being added all the time. Thanks for your support as always. Let's get into the story. Chapter 5. Leo. Leo's tour was going great until he learned about the dragon. The archer dude, Will Solace, seemed pretty cool. Everything he showed Leo was so amazing it should have been illegal. Real Greek warships moored at the beach that sometimes had practice fights with flaming arrows and explosives. Sweet. Arts and crafts sessions where you could make sculptures with chainsaws and blowtorches. Leo was like, sign me up. The woods were stocked with dangerous monsters, and no one should ever go in there alone. Nice. And the camp was overflowing with fine-looking girls. Leo didn't quite understand the whole related to the gods business, but he hoped that didn't mean he was cousins with all these ladies. That would suck. At the very least, he wanted to check out these underwater girls in the lake again. They were definitely worth drowning for. Will showed him the cabins, the dining pavilion and the sword arena. Do I get a sword? Leo asked. Will glanced at him like he found the idea disturbing. You'll probably make your own, seeing as how you're in cabin 9. Yeah, what's with that? Vulcan. Usually we don't call the gods by their Roman names, Will said. The original names are Greek. Your dad is Hephaestus. Festus? Leo had heard somebody say that before, but he was still dismayed. Sounds like the god of cowboys. Hephaestus, Will corrected, god of blacksmiths and fire. Leo had heard that too, but he was trying not to think about it. The god of fire, seriously. Considering what had happened to his mum, that seemed like a sick joke. So the flaming hammer over my head, Leo said. Good thing or bad thing? Will took a while to answer. You were claimed almost immediately. That's usually good. But that rainbow pony dude, Butch, he mentioned a curse? Ah, look, it's nothing. Since Cabin 9's last head counsellor died. Died? Like, painfully? I ought to let your bunkmates tell you about it. Yeah, where are my home dogs? Shouldn't their counsellor be giving me the VIP tour? He, can't. You'll see why. Will forged ahead before Leo could ask anything else. Curses and death, Leo said to himself. This just gets better and better. He was halfway across the green when he spotted his old babysitter, and she was not the kind of person he expected to see at Demigod Camp. Leo froze in his tracks. What's wrong? Will asked. Tia Khalida. Auntie Khalida. That's what she'd called herself. But Leo hadn't seen her since he was 5 years old. She was just standing there in the shadow of a big white cabin at the end of the green watching him. She wore her black linen widow's dress, with a black shawl pulled over her hair. Her face hadn't changed, leathery skin, piercing dark eyes. Her withered hands were like claws. She looked ancient, but no different than Leo remembered. That old lady, Leo said. What's she doing here? Will tried to follow his gaze. What old lady? Dude, the old lady, the one in black. How many old ladies do you see over there? Will frowned. I think you've had a long day, Leo. The mist could still be playing tricks on your mind. How about we head straight to your cabin now? Leo wanted to protest, but when he looked back towards the big white cabin, Tia Khalida was gone. He was sure she'd been there, almost as if thinking about his mum had summoned Khalida back from the past. And that wasn't good, because Tia Khalida had tried to kill him. Just messing with you, man. Leo pulled some gears and levers from his pockets and started fiddling with them to calm his nerves. He couldn't have everybody at camp thinking he was crazy, at least not crazier than he really was. Let's go see Cabin 9, he said. I'm in the mood for a good curse. From the outside, the Hephaestus cabin looked like an oversized motorhome with shiny metal walls and metal slatted windows. The entrance was like bank vault door, circular and several feet thick. It opened with lots of brass gears turning and hydraulic pistons blowing smoke. Leo whistled. They've got a steampunk theme going on, huh? Inside, the cabin seemed deserted. High-tech steel bunks were folded against the walls. Each had a digital control panel, blinking LED lights, glowing gems and interlocking gears. Leo figured each camper had his own combination lock to release his bed, and there was probably an alcove behind it with storage, maybe some traps to keep out unwanted visitors. At least, that's the way Leo would have designed it. A fire pole came down from the floor above, even though the cabin didn't appear to have another floor from the outside. A circular staircase led down into some kind of basement. The walls were lined with every kind of power tool Leo could imagine, plus a huge assortment of knives, swords, and other implements of destruction. A large workbench overflowed with scrap metal, screws, bolts, washers, nails, rivets, and a million other machine parts. Leo had a strong urge to shovel them all into his coat pockets. He loved that kind of stuff, but he'd need 100 more coats to fit it all. Looking around, he could almost imagine he was back in his mum's machine shop, Not the weapons, maybe, but the tools, the piles of scrap, the smell of grease and metal and hot engines. She would have loved this place. He pushed that thought away. He didn't like painful memories. Keep moving. That was his motto. Don't dwell on things. Don't stay in one place too long. It was the only way to stay ahead of the sadness. He picked a long implement from the wall. A weed whacker. What's the god of fire want with a weed whacker? A voice in the shadows said, "You'd be surprised." At the back of the room, one of the bunk beds was occupied. A curtain of dark camouflage material retracted, and Leo could see the guy who'd been invisible a second before. It was hard to tell much about him because he was covered in a body cast. His head was wrapped in gauze except for his face, which was puffy and bruised. He looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy after a beatdown. "I'm Jake Mason," the guy said. "I'd shake your hand, but..." "Yeah," Leo said. "Don't get up." The guy cracked a smile, and then winced like it hurt to move his face. Leo wondered what had happened to him, but he was afraid to ask. "Welcome to Cabin 9, Jake said. "Been almost a year since we had any new kids. I'm head counsellor for now." "For now?" Leo asked. Will Solis cleared his throat. "So where is everybody, Jake?" "Down at the forges," Jake said wistfully. "They're working on, that problem." "Oh," Will changed the subject. "So you got a spare bed for Leo?" Jake studied Leo, sizing him up. "You believe in curses, Leo, or ghosts?" "I just saw my evil babysitter, Tia Khalida," Leo thought. "She's got to be dead after all these years, and I can't go a day without remembering my mum in that machine shop fire. Don't talk to me about ghosts, doughboy." But aloud he said, "Ghosts? Pfft, nah, I'm cool. A storm spirit chucked me down the Grand Canyon this morning, but all in a day's work, right?" Jake nodded. "That's good, because I'll give you the best bed in the cabin, Beckendorf's." "Whoa, Jake," Will said. "You sure?" Jake called out, "Bunk 1A, please." The whole cabin rumbled. A circular section of the floor spiraled open like a camera lens, and a full-size bed popped up. The bronze frame had a built-in game station at the footboard, a stereo system in the headboard, a glass door refrigerator mounted in the base, and a whole bunch of control panels running down the side. Leo jumped right in and lay back with his arms behind his head. "I can handle this." "It retracts into a private room below," Jake said. "Oh, heck yes," Leo said. "See y'all. I'll be down in the Leo cave. Which button do I press?" "Hold on," Will Solis protested. "You guys have private underground rooms?" Jake probably would have smiled if it didn't hurt so much. "We've got lots of secrets, Will. You Apollo guys can't have all the fun. Our campers have been excavating the tunnel system under Cabin 9 for almost a century. We still haven't found the end. Anyway, Leo, if you don't mind sleeping in a dead man's bed, it's yours." Suddenly, Leo didn't feel like kicking back. He sat up, careful not to touch any of the buttons. The counsellor who died. This was his bed. "Yeah," Jake said. "Charles Beckendorf." Leo imagined saw blades coming through the mattress, or maybe a grenade sewn inside the pillows. He didn't die in this bed, did he? "No," Jake said. "In the Titan War, last summer." "The Titan War," Leo repeated, "which has nothing to do with this very fine bed?" "The Titans," Will said, like Leo was an idiot. "The big powerful guys that ruled the world before the gods. They tried to make a comeback last summer. Their leader, Kronos, built a new palace on top of Mount Tam in California. Their armies came to New York and almost destroyed Mount Olympus. A lot of demigods died trying to stop them." "I'm guessing this wasn't on the news," Leo said. It seemed like a fair question, but Will shook his head in disbelief. "You didn't hear about Mount St. Helens erupting, or the freak storms across the country, or that building collapsing at St. Louis?" Leo shrugged. Last summer, he'd been on the run from another foster home. Then a truancy officer caught him in New Mexico, and the court sentenced him to the nearest correctional facility, the Wilderness School. "Guess I was busy." "Doesn't matter," Jake said. "You were lucky to miss it. The thing is, Beckendorf was one of the first casualties, and ever since then..." "Your cabin's been cursed," Leo guessed. Jake didn't answer. Then again, the dude was in a body cast. This was an answer. Leo started noticing little things that he hadn't seen before. An explosion mark on the wall, a stain on the floor that might have been oil or blood, broken swords and smashed machines kicked into the corners of the room, maybe out of frustration. The place did feel unlucky. Jake sighed half-heartedly. "Well, I should get some sleep. I hope you like it here, Leo. It used to be really nice." He closed his eyes and the camouflage curtain drew itself across the bed. "Come on, Leo," Will said. "I'll take you to the forges." As they were leaving, Leo looked back at his new bed, and he could almost imagine a dead counsellor sitting there, another ghost who wasn't going to leave Leo alone. Chapter 6. Leo. "How did he die?" Leo asked. "I mean, Beckendorf." Will Solis trudged ahead. "Explosion. Beckendorf and Percy Jackson blew up a cruise ship full of monsters. Beckendorf didn't make it out. There was that name again, Percy Jackson, Annabeth's missing boyfriend. That guy must have been into everything around here, Leo thought. So Beckendorf was pretty popular, Leo asked. I mean, before he blew up. He was awesome, Will agreed. It was hard on the whole camp when he died. Jake, he became head counselor in the middle of the war. Same as I did, actually. Jake did his best, but he never wanted to be leader. He just likes building stuff. And then after the war, things started to go wrong. Cabin 9's chariots blew up. Their automatons went haywire. Their inventions started to malfunction. It was like a curse, and eventually people started calling it that, the curse of Cabin 9. And then Jake had his accident. Which had nothing to do with the problem he mentioned, Leo guessed. They're working on it, Will said without enthusiasm. And here we are. The forge looked like a steam-powered locomotive had smashed into the Greek Parthenon, and they had fused together. White marble columns lined the soot-stained walls. Chimneys pumped smoke over an elaborate gable carved with a bunch of gods and monsters. The building sat at the edge of a stream, with several water wheels turning a series of bronze gears. Leo heard machinery grinding inside, fires roaring and hammers ringing on anvils. They stepped through the doorway, and a dozen guys and girls who'd been working on various projects all froze. The noise died down to the roar of the forge and the click, click, click of gears and levers. "Sup, guys?" Will said. "This is your new brother, Leo. What's your last name?" "Valdez." Leo looked around at the other campers. Was he really related to all of them? His cousins came from some big families, but he'd always just had his mum, until she died. Kids came up and started shaking hands and introducing themselves. Their names blurred together. Shane, Christopher, Nissa, Harley, yeah, like the motorcycle. Leo knew he'd never keep everybody straight. Too many of them, too overwhelming. None of them looked like the others. All different face types, skin tone, hair colour, height. You'd never think, hey, look, it's the Hephaestus bunch. But they all had powerful hands, rough with calluses and stained with engine grease. Even little Harley, who couldn't have been more than 8, looked like he could go 6 rounds with Chuck Norris without breaking a sweat. And all the kids shared a sad kind of seriousness. Their shoulders slumped like life had beaten them down pretty hard. Several looked as if they'd been physically beaten up, too. Leo counted 2 arm slings, 1 pair of crutches, an eye patch, 6 tubigrip bandages, and about 7,000 band-aids. "Well, all right," Leo said. "I hear this is the party cabin." Nobody laughed. They all just stared at him. Will Solis patted Leo's shoulder. "I'll leave you guys to get acquainted. Somebody show Leo to dinner when it's time." "I've got it," one of the girls said. Nissa, Leo remembered. She wore camo pants, a tank top that showed off her buff arms, and a red bandana over a mop of dark hair. Except for the smiley face, band-aid on her chin, she looked like one of those female action heroes. Like any second she was going to grab a machine gun and start mowing down evil aliens. "Cool," Leo said. "Always wanted a sister who could beat me up." Nissa didn't smile. "Come on, Joker boy, I'll show you around." Leo was no stranger to workshops. He'd grown up around grease monkeys and power tools. His mum used to joke that his first pacifier was a lug wrench, but he'd never seen any place like the camp forge. One guy was working on a battle axe. He kept testing the blade on a slab of concrete. Each time he swung, the axe cut into a slab like it was warm cheese, but the guy looked unsatisfied and went back to honing the edge. "What's he planning to kill with that thing?" Leo asked Nissa. "A battleship?" "You never know, even with celestial bronze." "That's the metal." She nodded. "Mined from Mount Olympus itself. Extremely rare. Anyway, it usually disintegrates monsters on contact, but big powerful ones have notoriously tough hides. Dracons, for instances." "You mean dragons?" "Similar species. You'll learn the difference in monster fighting class." "Monster fighting class? Yeah, I already got my black belt in that." She didn't crack a smile. Leo hoped she wasn't this serious all the time. His dad's side of the family had to have some sense of humour, right? They passed a couple of guys making a bronze wind-up toy. At least that's what it looked like. It was a 6-inch tall centaur, half man, half horse, armed with a miniature bow. One of the campers cranked the centaur's tail, and it whirred to life. It galloped across the table, yelling, "Die, mosquito! Die, mosquito!" and shooting everything in sight. Apparently this had happened before, because everybody knew to hit the floor except Leo. 6 needle-sized arrows embedded themselves in his shirt before a camper grabbed a hammer and smashed the centaur to pieces. "Stupid curse." The camper waved his hammer at the sky. "I just want a magic bug killer. Is that too much to ask?" "Ouch," Leo said. Nissa pulled the needles out of his shirt. "Ah, you're fine. Let's move on before they rebuild it." Leo rubbed his chest as they walked. "That sort of thing happen a lot?" "Lately," Nissa said. "Everything we build turns to junk." "The curse?" Nissa frowned. I don't believe in curses, but something's wrong, and if we don't figure out the dragon problem, it's going to get even worse. The dragon problem. Leo hoped she was talking about a miniature dragon, maybe one that killed cockroaches, but he got the feeling he wasn't going to be so lucky. Nissa took him over to a big wall map that a couple of girls were studying, the map showing their camp, a semicircle of land with Long Island Sound on the north shore, the woods to the west, the cabins on the east, and a ring of hills to the south. It's got to be in the hills, the first girl said. We looked in the hills, the second argued. The woods are a better hiding place, but we already set traps. Hold up, Leo said. You guys lost a dragon, a real full-size dragon. It's a bronze dragon, Nissa said, but yes, it's a life-size automaton. Hephaestus' cabin built it years ago. Then it was lost in the woods until a few summers back, when Beckendorf found it in pieces and rebuilt it. It's been helping protect the camp, but it's a little unpredictable. Unpredictable, Leo said. It goes haywire and smashes down cabins, sets people on fire, tries to eat the satyrs. That's pretty unpredictable. Nissa nodded. Beckendorf was the only one who could control it. And then he died, and the dragon just got worse and worse. Finally, it went berserk and ran off. Occasionally it shows up, demolishes something and runs away again. Everyone expects us to find it and destroy it. Destroy it? Leo was appalled. You've got a life-size bronze dragon and you want to destroy it. It breathes fire, Nissa explained. It's deadly and out of control. But it's a dragon, dude. That's so awesome. Can't you try talking to it, controlling it? We tried. Jake Mason tried. You saw how well that worked. Leo thought about Jake, wrapped in a body cast, lying alone on his bunk. Still, there's no other option. Nissa turned to the other girls. Let's try more traps in the woods. Here, here, and here. Bait them with 30-weight motor oil. The dragon drinks that? Leo asked. Yeah, Nissa sighed regretfully. He used to like it with a little Tabasco sauce, right before bed. If he springs a trap, we can come in with acid sprayers. Should melt through his hide. And then we get metal cutters and finish the job. They all looked sad. Leo realised they didn't want to kill the dragon any more than he did. Guys, he said, there has to be another way. Nissa looked doubtful, but a few other campers stopped what they were working on and drifted over to hear the conversation. Like what? One asked. The thing breathes fire. We can't even get close. Fire, Leo thought. Oh man, the things he could tell them about fire. But he had to be careful, even if these were his brothers and sisters, especially if he had to live with them. Well, he hesitated, Hephaestus is the god of fire, right? So don't any of you have, like, fire resistance or something? Nobody acted as if it were a crazy question, which was a relief, but Nissa shook her head gravely. That's a Cyclops ability, Leo. Demigod children of Hephaestus, we're just good with our hands. We're builders, craftsmen, weaponsmiths, stuff like that. Leo's shoulders slumped. Oh. A guy in the back said, well, a long time ago... Yeah, okay, Nissa conceded. A long time ago, some children of Hephaestus were born with power over fire, but that ability was very, very rare, and always dangerous. No demigod like that has been born in centuries. The last one... She looked at one of the other kids for help. 1666, the girl offered. Guy named Thomas Fainor. He started the Great Fire of London, destroyed most of the city. Right, Nissa said. When a child of Hephaestus like that appears, it usually means something catastrophic is about to happen, and we don't need any more catastrophes. Leo tried to keep his face clear of emotion, which wasn't his strong suit. I guess I see your point. Too bad, though. If you could resist flames, you could get close to the dragon. And then it would kill you with its claws and fangs, Nissa said, or simply step on you. No, we've got to destroy it. Trust me, if anyone could figure out another answer... She didn't finish, but Leo got the message. This was the cabin's big test. If they could do something only Beckendorf could do, if they could subdue the dragon without killing it, then maybe their curse would be lifted. But they were stumped for ideas. Any camper who figured out how would be a hero. A conch horn blew in the distance. Campers started putting away their tools and projects. Leo hadn't realised it was getting so late, but he looked through the windows and saw the sun going down. His ADHD did that to him sometimes. If he was bored, a 50-minute class seemed like 6 hours. If he was interested in something, like touring a demigod camp, hours slipped away and bam, the day was over. Dinner, Nissa said. Come on, Leo. Up at the pavilion, right? He asked. She nodded. You guys go ahead, Leo said. Can you give me a second? Nissa hesitated, and then her expression softened. Sure. It's a lot to process. I remember my first day. Come up when you're ready. Just don't touch anything. Almost every project in here can kill you if you're not careful. No touching, Leo promised. His cabin mates filed out of the forge. Soon Leo was alone with the sounds of the bellows, the water wheels, and small machines clicking and whirring. He stared at the map of camp, the locations where his newfound siblings were going to put traps to catch a dragon. It was wrong, plain wrong. Very rare, he thought, and always dangerous. He held out his hand and studied his fingers. They were long and thin, not calloused like the other Hephaestus campers. Leo had never been the biggest or the strongest kid. He'd survived in tough neighbourhoods, tough schools, tough foster homes by using his wits. He was the class clown, the court jester, because he'd learned early that if you cracked jokes and pretended you weren't scared, you usually didn't get beaten up. Even the baddest gangster kids would tolerate you, keep you around for laughs. Plus, humour was a good way to hide the pain. And if that didn't work, there was always plan B. Run away. Over and over. There was a plan C, but he promised himself never to use it again. He felt an urge to try it now, something he hadn't done since the accident, since his mum's death. He extended his fingers and felt them tingle, like they were waking up, pins and needles. And then flames flickered to life, curls of red-hot fire dancing across his palm. Chapter 7. Jason. As soon as Jason saw the house, he knew he was a dead man. Here we are, Drew said cheerfully. The big house, camp headquarters. It didn't look threatening, just a 4-story manor painted baby blue with white trim. The wraparound porch had lounge chairs, a card table, and an empty wheelchair. Wind chimes shaped like nymphs turned into trees as they spun. Jason could imagine old people coming here for summer vacation, sitting on the porch and sipping prune juice while they watched the sunset. Still, the windows seemed to glare down at him like angry eyes. The wide-open doorway looked ready to swallow him. On the highest gable, a bronze eagle weather vane spun in the wind and pointed straight in his direction, as if telling him to turn around. Every molecule in Jason's body told him he was on enemy ground. I am not supposed to be here, he said. Drew circled her arm through his. Oh, please. You're perfect here, sweetie. Believe me, I've seen a lot of heroes. Drew smelled like Christmas, a strange combination of pine and nutmeg. Jason wondered if she always smelled like that, or if it was some kind of special perfume for the holidays. Her pink eyeliner was really distracting. Every time she blinked, he felt compelled to look at her. Maybe that was the point, to show off her warm brown eyes. She was pretty, no doubt about that, but she made Jason feel uncomfortable. He slipped his arm away as gently as he could. Look, I appreciate... Is it that girl? Drew pouted. Oh, please, tell me you are not dating the dumpster queen. You mean Piper? Jason wasn't sure how to answer. He didn't think he'd ever seen Piper before today, but he felt strangely guilty about it. He knew he shouldn't be in this place. He shouldn't befriend these people, and certainly he shouldn't date one of them. Still, Piper had been holding his hand when he woke up on the bus. She believed she was his girlfriend. She'd been brave on the skywalk, fighting those Venti, and when Jason had caught her in mid-air and they'd held each other face to face, he couldn't pretend he wasn't a little tempted to kiss her. But that wasn't right. He didn't even know his own story. He couldn't play with her emotions like that. Drew rolled her eyes. Let me help you decide, sweetie. You can do better. A guy with your looks and obvious talent? She wasn't looking at him, though. She was staring at a spot right above his head. You're waiting for a sign, he guessed, like what popped over Leo's head. What? No, well, yes, from what I heard, you're pretty powerful, right? You're going to be important at camp, so I figure your parent will claim you right away, and I'd love to see that. I want to be with you every step of the way. So is your dad or mum the god? Please tell me it's not your mum. I would hate it if you were an Aphrodite kid. Why? Then you'd be my half-brother, silly. You can't date somebody from your own cabin. Yuck. But aren't all the gods related? Jason asked. So isn't everyone here your cousin or something? Aren't you cute, sweetie? The godly side of your family doesn't count except for your parent, so anybody from another cabin, they're fair game. So who's your godly parent, mum or dad? As usual, Jason didn't have an answer. He looked up, but no glowing sign popped above his head. At the top of the big house, the weather vane was still pointing his direction. That bronze eagle glaring as if to say, turn around, kid, while you still can. And then he heard footsteps on the front porch. No, not footsteps, hooves. Kyron, Drew called. This is Jason. He's totally awesome. Jason backed up so fast he almost tripped. Rounding the corner of the porch was a man on horseback, except he wasn't on horseback. He was part of the horse. From the waist up, he was human, with curly brown hair and well-trimmed beard. He wore a t-shirt that said World's Best Centaur and had a quiver and bow strapped to his back. His head was so high up he had to duck to avoid the porch lights, because from the waist down he was a white stallion. Kyron started to smile at Jason, and then the colour drained from his face. You. The centaur's eyes flared like a cornered animal's. You should be dead. Kyron ordered Jason, well, invited, but it sounded like an order, to come inside the house. He told Drew to go back to her cabin, which Drew didn't like and didn't look happy about. The centaur trotted over to the empty wheelchair on the porch. He slipped off his quiver and bow and backed up to the chair, which opened like a magician's box. Chiron gingerly stepped into it with his back legs and began scrunching himself into a space that should have been much too small. Jason imagined a truck's reversing noises, beep, 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 as the centaur's lower half disappeared and the chair folded up, popping up out a set of fake human legs covered in a blanket, so Chiron appeared to be a regular mortal guy in a wheelchair. "Follow me," he ordered. "We have lemonade." The living room looked like it had been swallowed by a rainforest. Grapevines curved up the walls and across the ceiling, which Jason found a little strange. He didn't think plants grew like that inside, especially in the winter, but these were leafy green and bursting with bunches of red grapes. Leather couches faced a stone fireplace with a crackling fire. Wedged in one corner, an old-style Pac-Man arcade game beeped and blinked. Mounted on the walls was an assortment of masks. Smiley, frowny, Greek theatre types, feathered Mardi Gras masks, Venetian carnival masks with big beak-like noses, carved wooden masks from Africa. Grapevines grew from their mouths, so they seemed to have leafy tongues. Some had red grapes bulging through their eye holes. But the weirdest thing was the stuffed leopard's head above the fireplace. It looked so real its head seemed to follow Jason, and then it snarled and Jason nearly leapt out of his skin. "Now, Seymour," Chiron chided. "Jason is a friend. Behave yourself." "That thing is alive?" Jason said. Chiron rummaged through the side pocket of his wheelchair, brought out a package of sausages. He threw one to the leopard, who snapped it up and licked his lips. "You must excuse the decor," Chiron said. "All this was a parting gift from our old director before he was recalled to Mount Olympus. He thought it would help us to remember him. Mr. D has a strange sense of humour." "Mr. D," Jason said. "Dionysus." Chiron poured lemonade, though his hands were trembling a little. "As for Seymour, well, Mr. D liberated him from a Long Island garage sale. The leopard is Mr. D's sacred animal, you see, and Mr. D was appalled that someone would stuff such a noble creature. He decided to grant it life, on the assumption that life as a mounted head was better than no life at all. I must say it's a kinder fate than Seymour's previous owner got." Seymour bared his fangs and sniffed the air as if hunting for more sausages. "If he's only a head," Jason said, "where does the food go when he eats?" "Better not to ask," Chiron said. "Please sit." Jason took some lemonade, though his stomach was fluttering. Chiron sat back in his wheelchair and tried for a smile, but Jason could tell it was forced. The old man's eyes were as deep and dark as wells. "So, Jason," he said, "would you mind telling me, where you're from?" "I wish I knew." Jason told him the whole story, from waking up on the bus to crash landing at Camp Half-Blood. He didn't see any point in hiding the details, and Chiron was a good listener. He didn't react to the story, other than to nod encouragingly for more. When Jason was done, the old man sipped his lemonade. "I see," Chiron said. "And you must have questions for me." "Only one," Jason admitted. "What did you mean when you said that I should be dead?" Chiron studied him with concern, as if he expected Jason to burst into flames. "My boy, do you know what these marks are on your arm? What they mean? The colour of your shirt? Do you remember anything?" Jason looked at the tattoo on his forearm. SPQR. The eagle, 12 straight lines. "No," he said, "nothing." "Do you know where you are?" Chiron asked. "Do you understand what this place is and who I am?" "You're Chiron the centaur," Jason said. "I'm guessing you're the same one from the old stories who used to train the Greek heroes like Heracles. This is a camp for demigods, children of the Olympian gods. So you believe those gods still exist?" "Yes," Jason said immediately. "I mean, I don't think we should worship them or sacrifice chickens to them or anything, but they're still around because they're a powerful part of civilization. They move from country to country as the centre of power shifts, like they moved from ancient Greece to Rome." I couldn't have said it better. Something about Chiron's voice had changed. "So you already know the gods are real. You have already been claimed, haven't you?" "Maybe," Jason answered. "I'm not really sure." Seymour the leopard snarled. Chiron waited, and Jason realised what had just happened. The centaur had switched to another language, and Jason had understood, automatically answering in the same tongue. "Kissarat," Jason faltered, and then made a conscious effort to speak English. "What was that?" "You know Latin," Chiron observed. "Most demigods recognise a few phrases, of course. It's in their blood, but not as much as ancient Greek. None can speak Latin fluently without practice." Jason tried to wrap his mind around what that meant, but too many pieces were missing from his memory. He still had the feeling that he shouldn't be here. It was wrong and dangerous. But at least Chiron wasn't threatening. In fact, the centaur seemed concerned for him, afraid for his safety. The fire reflected in Chiron's eyes, making them dance fretfully. "I taught your namesake, you know, the original Jason. He had a hard path. I've seen many heroes come and go. Occasionally they have happy endings. Mostly they don't. It breaks my heart, like losing a child each time one of my pupils dies. But you are not like any pupil I've ever taught. Your presence here could be a disaster. Thanks, Jason said. You must be an inspiring teacher. I am sorry, my boy, but it's true. I had hoped that after Percy's success... Percy Jackson, you mean? Annabeth's boyfriend, the one who's missing? Chiron nodded. I hoped that after he succeeded in the Titan War and saved Mount Olympus, we might have some peace. I might be able to enjoy one final triumph, a happy ending, and perhaps retire quietly. I should have known better. The last chapter approaches, just as it did before. The worst is yet to come. In the corner, the arcade game made a sad pew-pew-pew-pew sound, like a Pac-Man had just died. Okay, Jason said. So, last chapter. Happened before. Worst yet to come. Sounds fun, but can we go back to the part where I'm supposed to be dead? I don't like that part. I'm afraid I can't explain, my boy. I swore on the river Styx and on all the things sacred that I would never. Chiron frowned. But you're here in violation of the same oath. That too should not be possible. I don't understand. Who would have done such a thing? Who? Seymour the leopard howled. His mouth froze half open. The arcade game stopped beeping. The fire stopped crackling. Its flames hardened like red glass. The masks stared down silently at Jason with their grotesque grape eyes and leafy tongues. Chiron? Jason asked. What's going? The old centaur had frozen too. Jason jumped off the couch, but Chiron kept staring at the same spot, his mouth open mid-sentence. His eyes didn't blink. His chest didn't move. Jason, a voice said. For a horrible moment, he thought the leopard had spoken, and then dark mist boiled out of Seymour's mouth, and an even worse thought occurred to Jason. Storm spirits. He grabbed the golden coin from his pocket, and with a quick flip it changed into a sword. The mist took the form of a woman in black robes. Her face was hooded, but her eyes glowed in the darkness. Over her shoulders, she wore a goatskin cloak. Jason wasn't sure how he knew it was goatskin, but he recognized it and knew it was important. Would you attack your patron? The woman chided. Her voice echoed in Jason's head. Lower your sword. Who are you? He demanded. How did you? Our time is limited, Jason. My prison grows stronger by the hour. It took me a full month to gather enough energy to work even the smallest magic through its bonds. I've managed to bring you here, but now I have little time left, and even less power. This may be the last time I can speak to you. You're in prison. Jason decided maybe he wouldn't lower his sword. Look, I don't know you, and you're not my patron. You know me, she insisted. I have known you since your birth. I don't remember. I don't remember anything. No, you don't, she agreed. That also was necessary. Long ago, your father gave me your life as a gift to placate my anger. He named you Jason after my favorite mortal. You belong to me. Whoa, Jason said. I don't belong to anyone. Now is the time to pay your debt, she said. Find my prison, free me, or their king will rise from the earth and I will be destroyed. You will never retrieve your memory. Is that a threat? You took my memories. You have until sunset on the solstice, Jason. 4 short days. Do not fail me. The dark woman dissolved, and the mist curled into the leopard's mouth. Time unfroze. Seymour's howl turned into a cough like he'd sucked in a hairball. The fire crackled to life. The arcade machine beeped, and Chiron said, Would dare to bring you here. Probably the lady in the mist, Jason offered. Chiron looked up in surprise. Weren't you just sitting? Why do you have a sword drawn? I hate to tell you this, Jason said, but I think your leopard just ate a goddess. He told Chiron about the frozen-in-time visit, the dark, misty figure that disappeared into Seymour's mouth. Oh dear, Chiron murmured. That does explain a lot. Then why don't you explain a lot to me, Jason said. Please. Before Chiron could say anything, footsteps reverberated on the porch outside. The front door blew open and Annabeth and another girl, a redhead, burst in, dragging Piper between them. Piper's head lolled like she was unconscious. What happened? Jason rushed over. What's wrong with her? Hera's cabin, Annabeth gasped, like they'd all run all the way. Vision. Bad. The red-headed girl looked up, and Jason saw that she'd been crying. I think, the red-headed girl gulped, I think I may have killed her. Chapter 8. Jason. Jason and the redhead, who introduced herself as Rachel, put Piper on the couch while Annabeth rushed down the hall to get a med kit. Piper was still breathing, but she wouldn't wake up. She seemed to be in some kind of coma. We've got to heal her, Jason insisted. There's a way, right? Seeing her so pale, barely breathing, Jason felt a surge of protectiveness. Maybe he didn't really know her. Maybe she wasn't his girlfriend. But they'd survived the Grand Canyon together. They'd come all this way. He'd left her side for a little while, and this had happened. Chiron put his hand on her forehead and grimaced. Her mind is in a fragile state. Rachel, what happened? I wish I knew, she said. As soon as I got to camp, I had a premonition about Hera's cabin. I went inside. Annabeth and Piper came in while I was there. We talked and then I just blanked out. Annabeth said I spoke in a different voice. A prophecy? Chiron asked. No, the spirit of Delphi comes from within. I know how that feels. This was like some long distance, a power trying to speak through me. Annabeth ran in with a leather pouch. She knelt next to Piper. Chiron, what happened back there? I've never seen anything like it. I've heard Rachel's prophecy voice. This was different. She sounded like an older woman. She grabbed Piper's shoulders and told her to free her from a prison. Jason guessed. Annabeth stared at him. How did you know that? Chiron made a three-finger gesture over his heart, like a ward against evil. Jason, tell them. Annabeth, the medicine bag, please. Chiron trickled drops from a medicine vial into Piper's mouth, while Jason explained what had happened when the room froze. The dark, misty woman who had claimed to be Jason's patron. When he was done, no one spoke, which made him more anxious. So does this happen often? He asked. Supernatural phone calls from convicts demanding you bust them out of jail. Your patron, Annabeth said. Not your godly parent? No, she said patron. She also said my dad had given her my life. Annabeth frowned. I've never heard of anything like that before. You said the storm spirit on the skywalk. He claimed to be working for some mistress who was giving him orders, right? Could it be this woman you saw, messing with your mind? I don't think so, Jason said. If she were my enemy, why would she be asking for my help? She's imprisoned. She's worried about some enemy getting more powerful, something about a king rising from the earth on the solstice. Annabeth turned to Chiron. Not Kronos. Please tell me it's not that. The centaur looked miserable. He held Piper's wrist, checking her pulse. At last he said, It is not Kronos. That threat is ended. But what? Annabeth asked. Chiron closed the medicine bag. Piper needs rest. We should discuss this later. Or now, Jason said. Sir, Mr. Chiron, you told me the greatest threat was coming, the last chapter. You can't possibly mean something worse than an army of titans, right? Oh, Rachel said in a small voice. Oh dear. The woman was Hera, of course. Her cabin, her voice. She showed herself to Jason at the same moment. Hera. Annabeth's snarl was even fiercer than Seymour's. She took you over. She did this to Piper. I think Rachel's right, Jason said. The woman did seem like a goddess, and she wore this goatskin cloak. That's a symbol of Juno, isn't it? It is, Annabeth scowled. I've never heard that. Chiron nodded reluctantly. Of Juno, Hera's Roman aspect. In her most warlike state, the goatskin cloak was a symbol of the Roman soldier. So Hera is imprisoned, Rachel asked. Who could do that to the queen of the gods? Annabeth crossed her arms. Well, whoever they are, maybe we should thank them. If they can shut up Hera. Annabeth, Chiron warned, she is still one of the Olympians. In many ways, she is the glue that holds the gods' family together. If she truly has been imprisoned and is in danger of destruction, this could shake the foundations of the world. It could unravel the stability of Olympus, which is never great, even in the best of times. And if Hera has asked Jason for help... Fine, Annabeth grumbled. Well, we know Titans can capture a god, right? Atlas captured Artemis a few years ago, and in the old stories, the gods captured each other in traps all the time. But something worse than a Titan? Jason looked at the leopard's head. Seymour was smacking his lips like the goddess had tasted much better than a sausage. Hera said she'd been trying to break through her prison bonds for a month, which is how long Olympus has been closed, Annabeth said. So the gods must know something bad is going on. But why use her energy to send me here? Jason asked. She wiped my memory, plopped me into the wilderness school field trip, and sent you a dream vision to come pick me up. Why am I so important? Why not just send up an emergency flare to the other gods, let them know where she is, so they can bust her out? The gods need heroes to do their will, down here on Earth, Rachel said. That's right, isn't it? Their fates are always intertwined with demigods. That's right, Annabeth said. But Jason's got a point. Why him? Why take his memory? And Piper's involved somehow, Rachel said. Hera sent her the same message. Free me. And Annabeth, this must have something to do with Percy's disappearing. Annabeth fixed her eyes on Chiron. Why are you so quiet, Chiron? What is it we're facing? The old centaur's face looked like it had aged 10 years in a matter of minutes. The lines around his eyes were deeply etched. My dear, in this I cannot help you. I am so sorry. Annabeth blinked. You've never kept information from me. Even the last great prophecy. I will be in my office. His voice was heavy. I need some time to think before dinner. Rachel, will you watch the girl? Tell Argus to bring her to the infirmary if you'd like. And Annabeth, you should speak with Jason. Tell him about the Greek and Roman gods. But the centaur turned his wheelchair and rolled off down the hallway. Annabeth's eyes turned stormy. She muttered something in Greek, and Jason got the feeling it wasn't complimentary towards centaurs. I'm sorry, Jason said. I think my being here, I don't know, I've messed things up coming to the camp somehow. Chiron said he'd sworn an oath and couldn't talk about it. What oath? Annabeth demanded. I've never seen him act this way. And why would he tell me to talk to you about the gods? Her voice trailed off. Apparently she just noticed Jason's sword sitting on the coffee table. She touched the blade gingerly, like it might be hot. Is this gold? She said. Do you remember where you got it? No, Jason said. Like I said, I don't remember anything. Annabeth nodded, like she'd just come up with a rather desperate plan. If Chiron won't help, we'll need to figure things out ourselves, which means Cabin 15, Rachel. You'll keep an eye on Piper? Sure, Rachel promised. Good luck, you two. Hold on, Jason said. What's in cabin 15? Annabeth stood. Maybe a way to get your memory back. They headed towards a newer wing of cabins in the southwest corner of the green. Some were fancy with glowing walls or blazing torches, but cabin 15 was not so dramatic. It looked like an old-fashioned prairie house with mud-thatched walls and a rush roof. On the door hung a wreath of crimson flowers, red poppies. Jason thought, though he wasn't sure how he knew. You think this is my parents' cabin? He asked. No, Annabeth said. This is the cabin for Hypnos, the god of sleep. Then why? You've forgotten everything, she said. If there's any god who can help us figure out memory loss, it's Hypnos. Inside, even though it was almost dinner time, 3 kids were sound asleep under piles of covers. A warm fire crackled in the hearth. Above the mantel hung a tree branch, each twig dripping white liquid into a collection of tin bowls. Jason was tempted to catch a drop on his finger just to see what it was, but he held himself back. Soft violin music played from somewhere. The air smelled like fresh laundry. The cabin was so cosy and peaceful that Jason's eyelids started to feel heavy. A nap sounded like a great idea. He was exhausted. There were plenty of empty beds, all with feather pillows and fresh sheets and fluffy quilts, and Annabeth nudged him. Snap out of it. Jason blinked. He realised his knees had been starting to buckle. Cabin 15 does that to everyone, Annabeth warned. If you ask me, this place is even more dangerous than the Ares cabin. At least with Ares, you can learn where the landmines are. Landmines? She walked up to the nearest snoring kid and shook his shoulder. Clovis, wake up. The kid looked like a baby cow. He had a blonde tuft of hair on a wedge-shaped head, with thick features and a thick neck. His body was stocky, but he had spindly little arms like he'd never lifted anything heavier than a pillow. Clovis! Annabeth shook harder, and then finally knocked on his forehead about 6 times. What? Clovis complained, sitting up and squinting. He yawned hugely, and both Annabeth and Jason yawned too. Stop that, Annabeth said. We need your help. I was sleeping. You're always sleeping. Good night. Before he could pass out, Annabeth yanked his pillow off his bed. That's not fair, Clovis complained meekly. Give it back. First, help, Annabeth said. Then, sleep. Clovis sighed. His breath smelled like warm milk. Fine. What? Annabeth explained about Jason's problem. Every once in a while, she'd snap her fingers under Clovis's nose to keep him awake. Clovis must have been really excited, because when Annabeth was done, he didn't pass out. He actually stood and stretched, and then blinked at Jason. So, you don't remember anything, huh? Just impressions, Jason said. Feelings, like... Yes, Clovis said. Like I know I shouldn't be here. At this camp, I'm in danger. Close your eyes. Jason glanced at Annabeth, but she nodded reassuringly. Jason was afraid he'd end up snoring in one of the bunks forever, but he closed his eyes. His thoughts became murky, as if he was sinking into a dark lake. The next thing he knew, his eyes snapped open. He was sitting in a chair by the fire. Clovis and Annabeth knelt next to him. Serious, all right? Clovis was saying. What happened? Jason said. How long? Just a few minutes, Annabeth said, but it was tense. You almost dissolved. Jason hoped she didn't mean literally, but her expression was solemn. Usually, Clovis said, memories are lost for good reason. They sink under the surface like dreams, and with a good sleep I can bring them back. But this... Lethe? Annabeth asked. No, Clovis said. Not even Lethe. Lethe? Jason asked. Clovis pointed to the tree branch dripping milky drops above the fireplace. The river Lethe in the underworld. It dissolves your memories, wipes your mind clean permanently. That's the branch of a popular tree from the underworld, dipped into the Lethe. It's the symbol of my father, Hypnos. Lethe is not a place you want to go swimming. Annabeth nodded. Percy went there once. He told me it was powerful enough to wipe the mind of a titan. Jason was suddenly glad he hadn't touched the branch. But that's not my problem? No, Clovis agreed. Your mind wasn't wiped and your memories weren't buried. They've been stolen. The fire crackled. Drops of Lethe water plinked into tin cups on the mantel. One of the other Hypnos campers muttered in his sleep. Something about a duck. Stolen, Jason said. How? A god, Clovis said. Only a god would have that kind of power. We know that, said Jason. It was Juno. But how did she do it and why? Clovis scratched his neck. Juno? He means Hera, Annabeth said. For some reason, Jason likes the Roman names. Clovis said. What? Jason asked. Does that mean something? Clovis said again, and this time Jason realised he was snoring. Clovis, he yelled. What? His eyes fluttered open. We were talking about pillows, right? No, gods, I remember. Greek and Roman, sure. Could be important. But they're the same gods, Annabeth said. Just different names. Not exactly, Clovis said. Jason sat forward, now very much awake. What do you mean, not exactly? Well, Clovis yawned, some gods are only Roman, like Janus or Pompona. But even the major Greek gods, it's not just their names that changed when they moved to Rome. Their appearances changed. Their attributes changed. They even had slightly different personalities. But, Annabeth faltered, okay, so maybe people saw them differently through the centuries. That doesn't change who they are. Sure it does. Clovis began to nod off and Jason snapped his fingers under his nose. Coming, mother, he yelped. Yeah, I'm awake. So, personalities. The gods change to reflect their host cultures. You know that, Annabeth. These days Zeus likes tailored suits, reality television and that Chinese food place on East 28th Street, right? It was the same in Roman times, and the gods were Roman almost as long as they were Greek. It was a big empire, lasted for centuries. So, of course, their Roman aspects are still a big part of their character. Makes sense, Jason said. Annabeth shook her head, mystified. But how do you know all this, Clovis? Oh, I spend a lot of time dreaming. I see the gods there all the time, always shifting forms. Dreams are fluid, you know. You can be in different places at once, always changing identities. It's a lot like being a god, actually. Like recently, I dreamed I was watching a Michael Jackson concert, and then I was on stage with Michael Jackson, and we were singing this duet, and I could not remember the words for The Girl Is Mine. Oh man, it was so embarrassing. Clovis, Annabeth interrupted. Back to Rome. Right, Rome, Clovis said. So we call the gods by their Greek names because that's their original form. But saying their Roman aspects are exactly the same, that's not true. In Rome, they became more warlike. They didn't mingle with mortals as much. They were harsher, more powerful, the gods of an empire. Like the dark side of the gods, Annabeth asked. Not exactly, Clovis said. They stood for discipline, honour, strength. Good things then, Jason said. For some reason he felt the need to speak up for the Roman gods, though wasn't sure why it mattered to him. Discipline is important, right? That's what made Rome last so long. Clovis gave him a curious look. That's true, but the Roman gods weren't very friendly. For instance, my dad, Hypnos, he didn't do much except sleep in Greek times. In Roman times they called him Somnos. He liked killing people who didn't stay alert in their jobs. If they nodded off at the wrong time, boom, they never woke up. He called the helmsman of Aeneas when they were sailing from Troy. Killed him. Nice guy, Annabeth said, but I still don't understand what it has to do with Jason. Neither do I, Clovis said, but if Hera took your memory, only she can give it back. And if I had to meet the Queen of the Gods, I'd hope she was more in a Hera mood than a Juno mood. Can I go back to sleep now? Annabeth stared at the branch above the fire, dripping Lethe water into the cups. She looked so worried, Jason wondered if she was considering a drink to forget her troubles. Then she stood and tossed Clovis his pillow. Thanks, Clovis. We'll see you at dinner. Can I get room service? Clovis yawned and stumbled to his bunk. I feel like... He collapsed with his butt in the air and his face buried in a pillow. Won't he suffocate? Jason asked. He'll be fine, Annabeth said, but I'm beginning to think that you are in serious trouble. Chapter 9. Piper. Piper dreamed about her last day with her dad. They were on the beach near Big Sur, taking a break from surfing. The morning had been so perfect, Piper knew something had to go wrong soon. A rabid horde of paparazzi, or maybe a great white shark attack. No way her luck could hold. But so far they'd had excellent waves, an overcast sky and a mile of oceanfront completely to themselves. Dad had found this out-of-the-way spot, rented a beachfront villa, and the properties on either side, and somehow managed to keep it secret. If he stayed there too long, Piper knew the photographers would find him. They always did. Nice job out there, Pipes. He gave her the smile he was famous for. Perfect teeth, dimpled chin, a twinkle in his dark eyes that always made grown women scream and ask him to sign their bodies in permanent marker. Seriously, Piper thought, get a life. His close-cropped black hair gleamed with salt water. "You're getting better at hanging 10. Piper flushed with pride. Though she suspected Dad was just being nice, she still spent most of her time wiping out. It took special talent to run over yourself with a surfboard. Her dad was the natural surfer, which made no sense since he'd been raised a poor kid in Oklahoma, hundreds of miles from the ocean. But he was amazing on the curls. Piper would have given up surfing a long time ago, except it let her spend time with him. There weren't many ways she could do that. Sandwich? Dad dug into the picnic basket his chef, Arno, had made. Let's see. Turkey pesto, crab cake wasabi, a Piper special, peanut butter and jam. She took the sandwich, though her stomach was too upset to eat. She always asked for PB&J. Piper was vegetarian, for one thing. She had been ever since they'd driven past that slaughterhouse in Chino, and the smell had made her insides want to come outside. But it was more than that. PB&J was simple food, like a regular kid would have for lunch. Sometimes she pretended her dad had actually made it for her, not a personal chef from France who liked to wrap the sandwich in gold leaf paper with a light-up sparkler instead of a toothpick. Couldn't anything be simple? That's why she turned down the fancy clothes Dad always offered, the designer shoes, the trips to the salon. She cut her own hair with a pair of plastic Garfield safety scissors, deliberately making it uneven. She preferred to wear beat-up running shoes, jeans, a t-shirt, and her old Polar Tech jacket from the time they went snowboarding. And she hated the snobby private schools Dad thought were good for her. She kept getting herself kicked out. He kept finding more schools. Yesterday she'd pulled her biggest heist yet, driving that borrowed BMW out of the dealership. She had to pull a bigger stunt each time because it took more and more to get Dad's attention. Now she regretted it. Dad didn't know yet. She'd meant to tell him that morning. Then he'd surprised her with this trip, and she couldn't ruin it. It was the first time they'd had a day together in, 3 months? What's wrong? He passed her a soda. Dad, there's something... Hold on, Pipes. That's a serious face. Ready for any 3 questions? They've been playing that game for years. Her dad's way of staying connected in the shortest possible amount of time. They could ask each other any 3 questions. Nothing off limits, and you had to answer honestly. The rest of the time, Dad promised to stay out of her business, which was easy, since he was never around. Piper knew most kids would find a Q&A like this with their parents totally mortifying, but she looked forward to it. It was like surfing, not easy, but a way to feel like she actually had a father. First question, she said. Mum. No surprise, that was always one of her topics. Her dad shrugged with resignation. What do you want to know, Piper? I've already told you, she disappeared. I don't know why or where she went. After you were born, she simply left. I never heard from her again. Do you think she's still alive? It wasn't a real question. Dad was allowed to say he didn't know, but she wanted to hear how he'd answer. He stared at the waves. Your grandpa, Tom, he said at last. He used to tell me that if you walked far enough towards the sunset, you'd come to ghost country, where you would talk to the dead. He said a long time ago you could bring the dead back, but then mankind messed up. Well, it's a long story. Like the land of the dead for the Greeks, Piper remembered. It was in the West too, and Orpheus, he tried to bring his wife back. Dad nodded. A year before, he'd had his biggest role as an ancient Greek king. Piper had helped him research the myths, all those old stories about people getting turned to stone and boiled in lakes of lava. They'd had a fun time reading together, and it made Piper's life seem not so bad. For a while, she'd felt closer to her dad, but like everything, it didn't last. Lots of similarities between Greek and Cherokee, Dad agreed. Wonder what your grandpa would think if he saw us now, sitting at the end of the western land. He'd probably think we're ghosts. So you're saying you believe those stories? You think Mum is dead? His eyes watered, and Piper saw the sadness behind them. She figured that's why women were so attracted to him. On the surface, he seemed confident and rugged, but his eyes held so much grief. Women wanted to find out why. They wanted to comfort him, and they never could. Dad told Piper it was a Cherokee thing. They all had that darkness inside them from generations of pain and suffering, but Piper thought it was more than that. I don't believe the stories, he said. They're fun to tell, but if I really believed in ghost country or animal spirits or Greek gods, I don't think I could sleep at night. I'd always be looking for somebody to blame. Somebody to blame for Grandpa Tom dying of lung cancer, Piper thought, before Dad got famous and had the money to help. For Mum, the only woman he'd ever loved, abandoning him without even a goodbye note, leaving him with a newborn girl he wasn't ready to care for. For his being so successful and yet still not happy. I don't know if she's alive, he said, but I do think she might as well be in the ghost country, Piper. There's no getting her back. If I believed otherwise, I don't think I could stand that either. Behind them, a car door opened. Piper turned and her heart sank. Jane was marching towards them in her business suit, wobbling over the sand in her high heels, her PDA in hand. The look on her face was partly annoyed, partly triumphant, and Piper knew she'd been in touch with the police. "Please fall down," Piper prayed. "If there's any animal spirit or Greek god that can help, make Jane take a header. I'm not asking for permanent damage, just knock her out for the rest of the day, please." But Jane kept advancing. "Dad," Piper said quickly, "something happened yesterday." But he'd seen Jane too. He was already reconstructing his business face. Jane wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious. A studio head called, a project fell through, or Piper had messed up again. "We'll get back to that, Pipes," he promised. "I'd better see what Jane wants. You know how she is." Yes, Piper knew. Dad trudged across the sand to meet her. Piper couldn't hear them talking, but she didn't need to. She was good at reading faces. Jane gave him the facts about the stolen car, occasionally pointing at Piper like she was a disgusting pet that had whizzed on the carpet. Dad's energy and enthusiasm drained away. He gestured for Jane to wait, and then he walked back to Piper. She couldn't stand that look in his eyes, like she'd betrayed his trust. "You told me you would try, Piper," he said. "Dad, I hate that school. I can't do it. I wanted to tell you about the BMW, but—" "They've expelled you," he said. "A car, Piper. You're 16 next year. I would buy you any car you want. How could you?" "You mean Jane could buy me a car?" Piper demanded. She couldn't help it. The anger just welled up and spilled out of her. "Dad, just listen for once. Don't make me wait for you to ask your stupid 3 questions. I want to go to regular school. I want you to take me to a parents' night, not Jane, or homeschool me. I learned so much when we read about Greece together. We could do all that all the time. We could." "Don't make this about me," her dad said. "I do the best I can, Piper. We've had this conversation." "No," she thought. "You've cut off this conversation for years." Her dad sighed. "Jane's talked to the police, brokered a deal. The dealership won't press charges, but you have to agree to go to a boarding school in Nevada. They specialize in problems, in kids with tough issues." "That's what I am." Her voice trembled. "A problem." "Piper, you said you'd try. You let me down. I don't know what else to do." "Do anything," she said, "but do it yourself. Don't let Jane handle it for you. You can't just send me away." Dad looked down at the picnic basket. His sandwich sat uneaten on a piece of gold leaf paper. They'd planned for a whole afternoon in the surf. Now that was ruined. Piper couldn't believe he'd really give in to Jane's wishes. Not this time. Not on something as huge as boarding school. "Go see her," Dad said. "She's got the details." "Dad!" He looked away, gazing at the ocean, like he could see all the way to ghost country. Piper promised herself she wouldn't cry. She headed up the beach towards Jane, who smiled coldly and held up a plane ticket. As usual, she'd already arranged everything. Piper was just another problem of the day that Jane could now check off her list. Piper's dream changed. She stood on a mountaintop at night, city lights glimmering below. In front of her a bonfire blazed. Purplish flames seemed to cast more shadows than light, but the heat was so intense her clothes steamed. "This is your second warning," a voice rumbled, so powerful it shook the earth. Piper had heard that voice before in her dreams. She tried to convince herself it wasn't as scary as she remembered, but it was worse. Behind the bonfire, a huge face loomed out of the darkness. It seemed to float over the flames, but Piper knew it must be connected to an enormous body. The crude features might have been chiselled out of rock. The face hardly seemed alive except for its piercing white eyes, like raw diamonds, and its horrible frame of dreadlocks, braided with human bones. It smiled, and Piper shivered. "You'll do what you're told," the giant said. "You'll go on the quest, do our bidding, and you may walk away alive. Otherwise—" He gestured to one side of the fire. Piper's father was hanging unconscious, tied to a stake. She tried to cry out. She wanted to call to her dad and demand the giant let him go, but her voice wouldn't work. "I'll be watching," the giant said. "Serve me and you both live. You have the word of Enceladus. Fail me. Well, I've slept for millennia, young demigod. I am very hungry. Fail, and I'll eat well." The giant roared with laughter. The earth trembled. A crevice opened at Piper's feet, and she tumbled into darkness. She woke feeling like she'd been trampled by an Irish step-dancing troupe. Her chest hurt, and she could barely breathe. She reached down and closed her hand around the hilt of a dagger, the dagger Annabeth had given her. Ketopris, Helen of Troy's weapon. So Camp Half-Blood hadn't been a dream. "How are you feeling?" someone asked. Piper tried to focus. She was lying in bed with a white curtain on one side, like a nurse's office. That red-headed girl, Rachel Dare, sat next to her. On the wall was a poster of a cartoon satyr who looked disturbingly like Coach Hedge with a thermometer sticking out of his mouth. The caption read, "Don't let sickness get you goat." "Where?" Piper's voice died when she saw the guy at the door. He looked like a typical California surfer dude, buff and tan, blonde hair, dressed in shorts and a t-shirt. But he had hundreds of blue eyes all over his body, along his arms, down his legs, all over his face. Even his feet had eyes, peering up at her from between the straps of his sandals. "That's Argus," Rachel said, "our head of security. He's just keeping an eye on things, so to speak." Argus nodded. The eye on his chin winked. "Where?" Piper tried again, but she felt like she was talking through a mouthful of cotton wool. "You're in the big house," Rachel said. "Camp offices. We brought you here when you collapsed." "You grabbed me," Piper remembered. Hera's voice. "I'm so sorry about that," Rachel said. "Believe me, it was not my idea to get possessed. Chiron healed you with some nectar." Nectar. The drink of the gods. In small amounts it heals demigods. If it doesn't, burn you to ashes. "Oh, fun." Rachel sat forward. "Do you remember your vision?" Piper had a moment of dread, thinking she might. Well, she meant the dream about the giant. Then she realized Rachel was talking about what happened in Hera's cabin. "Something's wrong with the goddess," Piper said. "She told me to free her like she's trapped. She mentioned the earth swallowing us and a fiery one, and something about the solstice." In the corner, Argus made a rumbling sound in his chest, his eyes all fluttered at once. "Hera created Argus," Rachel explained. "He's actually very sensitive when it comes to her safety. We're trying to keep him from crying, because last time that happened, well, it caused quite a flood." Argus sniffled. He grabbed a fistful of Kleenex from the bedside table and started dabbing eyes all over his body. "So," Piper tried not to stare as Argus wiped the tears from his elbows. "What's happened to Hera?" "We're not sure," Rachel said. "Annabeth and Jason were here for you. By the way, Jason didn't want to leave you, but Annabeth had an idea, something that might restore his memories." That's great. Jason had been here for her. She wished she'd been conscious for that. But if he got his memories back, would that be a good thing? She was still holding out hope that they really did know each other. She didn't want their relationship to be just a trick of the mist. Get over yourself, she thought. If she was going to save her dad, it didn't matter whether Jason liked her or not. He would hate her eventually. Everyone here would. She looked down at the ceremonial dagger strapped to her side. Annabeth had said it was a sign of power and status, but not normally used in battle. All show and no substance. A fake, just like Piper. And its name was Catoptris, looking glass. She didn't dare unsheath it again, because she couldn't bear to see her own reflection. "Don't worry," Rachel squeezed her arm. "Jason seems like a good guy. He had a vision too, a lot like yours. Whatever's happened with Hera. I think you two are meant to work together." Rachel smiled like this was good news, but Piper's spirits plunged even further. She'd thought that this quest, whatever it was, would involve nameless people. Now Rachel was basically telling her, good news, not only is your dad being held ransom by a cannibal giant, you also get to betray the guy you like. How awesome is that? "Hey," Rachel said, no need to cry. You'll figure it out." Piper wiped her tears, trying to get control of herself. This wasn't like her. She was supposed to be tough, a hardened car thief, the scourge of LA private schools. Here she was crying like a baby. "How can you know what I'm facing?" Rachel shrugged. "I know it's a hard choice, and your options aren't great. Like I said, I get hunches sometimes. But you're going to be claimed at the campfire, and one was sure, when you know who your godly parent is, things might be clearer." Clearer, Piper thought, not necessarily better. She sat up in bed. Her forehead ached like someone had driven a spike between her eyes. "There's no getting your mother back," her dad had told her. But apparently tonight her mum might claim her. For the first time, Piper wasn't sure she wanted that. "I hope it's Athena." She looked up, afraid Rachel might make fun of her, but the oracle just smiled. "Piper, I don't blame you, truthfully. I think Annabeth is hoping that too. You guys are a lot alike." The comparison made Piper feel even guiltier. "Another hunch. You don't know anything about me. You'd be surprised. You're just saying that because you're an oracle, aren't you? You're supposed to sound all mysterious." Rachel laughed. "Don't be giving away my secrets, Piper, and don't worry. Things will work out. Just maybe not the way you plan." "That's not making me feel better." Somewhere in the distance, a conch horn blew. Argus grumbled and opened the door. "Dinner?" Piper guessed. "You slept through it," Rachel said. "Time for the campfire. Let's go find out who you are." Chapter 10. Piper. The whole campfire idea freaked Piper out. It made her think of that huge purple bonfire in the dreams and her father tied to a stake. What she got instead was almost as terrifying. A sing-along. The amphitheatre steps were carved into the side of a hill, facing a stone-lined fire pit. 50 or 60 kids filled the rows, clustered into groups under various banners. Piper spotted Jason in the front next to Annabeth. Leo was nearby, sitting with a bunch of burly-looking campers under a steel-grey banner emblazoned with a hammer. Standing in front of the fire, half a dozen campers with guitars and strange old-fashioned harps, lyres, were jumping around, leading a song about pieces of armour, something about how their grandma got dressed for war. Everybody was singing with them, making gestures for the pieces of armour, and joking around. It was quite possibly the weirdest thing Piper had ever seen. One of those campfire songs that would have been completely embarrassing in daylight, but in the dark, with everybody participating, it was kind of corny and fun. As the energy level got higher, the flames did too, turning from red to orange to gold. Finally, the song ended with a lot of rowdy applause. A guy on a horse trotted up. At least, in the flickering light, Piper thought it was a guy on a horse. Then she realised it was a centaur. His bottom half a white stallion, his top half a middle-aged guy with curly hair and a trimmed beard. He brandished a spear, impaled with toasted marshmallows. Very nice, and a special welcome to our new arrivals. I'm Kyron, Camp Activities Director, and I'm happy you have all arrived here alive and with most of your limbs attached. In a moment, I promise, we'll get to the s'mores. But first, what about capture the flag? Somebody yelled. Grumbling broke out among some kids in armour, sitting under a red banner with the emblem of a boar's head. Yes, the centaur said, I know the Ares cabin is anxious to return to the woods for our regular games. And kill people, one of them shouted. However, Kyron said, until the dragon is brought under control, that won't be possible. Cabin 9, anything to report on that? He turned to Leo's group. Leo winked at Piper and shot her with a finger gun. The girl next to him stood uncomfortably. She wore an army jacket, a lot like Leo's, with her hair covered in a red bandana. We're working on it. More grumbling. How, Nissa? An Ares kid demanded. Really hard, the girl said. Nissa sat down to a lot of yelling and complaining, which caused the fire to sputter chaotically. Kyron stamped his hoof against the fire pit stones. Bang, 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 and the campers fell silent. We will have to be patient, Kyron said. In the meantime, we have more pressing matters to discuss. Percy? Someone asked. The fire dimmed even further, but Piper didn't need the mood flames to sense the crowd's anxiety. Kyron gestured to Annabeth. She took a deep breath and stood. I didn't find Percy, she announced. Her voice caught a little when she said his name. He wasn't at the Grand Canyon, like I thought, but we're not giving up. We've got teams everywhere. Grover, Tyson, Nico, the Hunters of Artemis. Everyone's out looking. We will find him. Kyron's talking about something different. A new quest. It's the Great Prophecy, isn't it? A girl called out. Everyone turned. The voice had come from a group in the back, sitting under a rose-coloured banner with a dove emblem. They'd been chatting among themselves and not paying much attention until their leader stood up. Drew. Everyone else looked surprised. Apparently Drew didn't address the crowd very often. Drew? Annabeth said. What do you mean? Well, come on. Drew spread her hands like the truth was obvious. Olympus is closed, Percy's disappeared, Hera sends you a vision, and you come back with 3 new demigods in one day. I mean, something weird is going on. The Great Prophecy has started, right? Piper whispered to Rachel. What's she talking about? The Great Prophecy? Then she realised everyone else was looking at Rachel too. Well, Drew called down, you're the oracle. Has it started or not? Rachel's eyes looked scary in the firelight. Piper was afraid she might clench up and start channeling a freaky peacock goddess again, but she stepped forward calmly and addressed the camp. Yes, she said, the Great Prophecy has begun. Pandemonium broke out. Piper caught Jason's eye. He mouthed, You all right? She nodded and managed to smile, but then looked away. It was too painful seeing him and not being with him. When the talking finally subsided, Rachel took another step towards the audience, and 50-plus demigods leaned away from her, as if one skinny, red-headed mortal was more intimidating than all of them put together. For those of you who have not heard it, Rachel said, the Great Prophecy was my first prediction. It arrived in August. It goes like this. 7 half-bloods shall answer the call. To storm or fire, the world must fall. Jason shot to his feet. His eyes looked wild, like he'd just been tasered. Even Rachel seemed caught off guard. Jason, she said, what's... Ut cum spiritu postrema sacramentum geremus, he chanted. Et hostes ornamenta adent ad iniam nesum. An uneasy silence settled on the group. Piper could see from their faces that several of them were trying to translate the lines. She could tell it was Latin, but she wasn't sure why her hopefully future boyfriend was suddenly chanting like a Catholic priest. You just finished the prophecy, Rachel stammered. An oath to keep with a final breath, and foes bear arms to be doors of death. How did you... I know those lines. Jason winced and put his hands to his temples. I don't know how, but I know that prophecy. In Latin, no less, Drew called out, handsome and smart. There was some giggling from the Aphrodite cabin. God, what a bunch of losers, Piper thought. But it didn't do much to break the tension. The campfire was burning a chaotic, nervous shade of green. Jason sat down looking embarrassed, but Annabeth put a hand on his shoulder and muttered something reassuring. Piper felt a pang of jealousy. It should have been her next to him, comforting him. Rachel Dare still looked a little shaken. She glanced back at Chiron for guidance, but the centaur stood grim and silent, as if he were watching a play. He couldn't interrupt, a tragedy that ended with a lot of people dead on stage. Well, Rachel said, trying to regain her composure. So yeah, that's the great prophecy. We hoped it might not happen for years, but I fear it's starting now. I can't give you proof. It's just a feeling, and like Drew said, some weird stuff is happening. The 7 demigods, whoever they are, have not been gathered yet. I get the feeling some are here tonight, some are not here. The campers began to stir and mutter, looking at each other nervously, until a drowsy voice in the crowd called out, I'm here! Oh, were you calling roll? Go back to sleep, Clovis, someone yelled, and a lot of people laughed. Anyway, Rachel continued, we don't know what the great prophecy means. We don't know what challenge the demigods will face, but since the first great prophecy predicted the Titan War, we can guess the second great prophecy will predict something at least that bad. Or worse, Chiron murmured. Maybe he didn't mean everyone to overhear, but they did. The campfire immediately turned dark purple, the same colour as Piper's dream. What we do know, Rachel said, is that the first phase has begun. A major problem has arisen, and we need a quest to solve it. Hera, the queen of the gods, has been taken. Shocked silence. Then 50 demigods started talking at once. Chiron pounded his hoof again, but Rachel still had to wait before she could get back their attention. She told them about the incident on the Grand Canyon skywalk, how Gleason Hedge had sacrificed himself when the storm spirits attacked, and the spirits had warned it was only the beginning. They apparently served some great mistress who would destroy all demigods. Then Rachel told them about Piper passing out in Hera's cabin. Piper tried to keep a calm expression, even when she noticed Drew in the back now, pantomiming a faint, and her friends giggling. Finally, Rachel told them about Jason's vision, in the living room of the big house. The message Hera had delivered there was so similar that Piper got a chill. The only difference, Hera had warned Piper not to betray her. Bow to his will, and their king shall rise, dooming us all. Hera knew about the giant's threat, but if that were true, why hadn't she warned Jason and exposed Piper as an enemy agent? Jason, Rachel said, do you remember your last name? He looked self-conscious, but he shook his head. Well, we'll just call you Jason then, Rachel said. It's clear Hera herself has issued you a quest. Rachel paused, as if giving Jason a chance to protest his destiny. Everyone's eyes were on him. There was so much pressure, Piper thought she would have buckled in his position, yet he looked brave and determined. He set his jaw and nodded. I agree. You must save Hera to prevent a great evil, Rachel continued, some sort of king from rising, for reasons we don't yet understand. It must happen by the winter solstice, only 4 days from now. That's the council day of the gods, Annabeth said. If the gods don't already know Hera's gone, they will definitely notice her absence by then. They'll probably break out fighting, accusing each other of taking her. That's what they usually do. The winter solstice, Chiron spoke up, is also the time of great darkness. The gods gather that day, as mortals always have, because there is strength in numbers. The solstice is a day when evil magic is strong, ancient magic, older than the gods. It's a day when things stir. The way he said it, stirring sounded absolutely sinister, like it should be a first-degree felony, not something you did to cookie dough. Okay, Annabeth said, glaring at the centaur. Thank you, Captain Sunshine. Whatever's going on, I agree with Rachel. Jason has been chosen to lead this quest, so why hasn't he been claimed? Somebody yelled from the Ares cabin. If he's so important, he has been claimed, Chiron announced. Long ago, Jason, give them a demonstration. At first, Jason didn't seem to understand. He stepped forward nervously, but Piper couldn't help thinking how amazing he looked, with his blonde hair glowing in the firelight, his regal features like a Roman statue's. He glanced at Piper, and she nodded encouragingly. She mimicked flipping a coin. Jason reached into his pocket. His coin flashed in the air, and when he caught it in his hand, he was holding a lance, a rod of gold, about 7 feet long with a spear tip at one end. The other demigods gasped. Rachel and Annabeth stepped back to avoid the point, which looked sharp as an ice pick. Wasn't that... Annabeth hesitated. I thought you had a sword. It came up tails, I think, Jason said. Same coin, long-range weapon form. Dude, I want one, yelled somebody from Mary's cabin. Better than Clarice's electric spear, Lamer, one of his brothers agreed. Electric, Jason murmured, like that was a good idea. Back away. Annabeth and Rachel got the message. Jason raised his javelin, and thunder broke open the sky. Every hair on Piper's arms stood straight up. Lightning arced down through the golden spear point and hit the campfire with the force of an artillery shell. When the smoke cleared and the ringing in Piper's ears subsided, the entire camp sat frozen in shock, half blind, covered in ashes, staring at the place where the fire had been. Cinders rained down everywhere. A burning log had impaled itself a few inches from the sleeping kid Clovis, who hadn't even stirred. Jason lowered his lance. Sorry. Chiron brushed some burning coals out of his beard. He grimaced, as if his worst fears had been confirmed. A little overkill, perhaps, but you've made your point, and I believe we know who your father is. Jupiter, Jason said. I mean Zeus, Lord of the Sky. Piper couldn't help smiling. It made perfect sense. The most powerful god, the father of all the greatest heroes in the ancient myths. No one else could possibly be Jason's dad. Apparently the rest of the camp wasn't so sure. Everything broke into chaos, with dozens of people asking questions, until Annabeth raised her arms. Hold it, she said. How can he be the son of Zeus? The big three, they're packed not to have mortal kids. How could we not have known about him sooner? Chiron didn't answer, but Piper got the feeling he knew, and the truth was not good. The important thing, Rachel said, is that Jason's here now. He has a quest to fulfill, which means he will need his own prophecy. She closed her eyes and swooned. 2 campers rushed forward and caught her. A third ran to the side of the amphitheatre and grabbed a bronze 3-legged stool, like they'd been trained for this duty. They eased Rachel onto the stool in front of the ruined hearth. Without the fire, the night was dark, but green mist started swirling around Rachel's feet. When she opened her eyes, they were glowing. Emerald smoke issued from her mouth. The voice that came out was raspy and ancient, the sound a snake would make if it could talk. Child of lightning, beware the earth. The giant's revenge the 7 shall birth. The forge and dove shall break the cage, and death unleash through Hera's rage. On the last word, Rachel collapsed, but her helpers were waiting to catch her. They carried her away from the hearth and laid her in the corner to rest. Is that normal? Piper asked, and then she realised she'd spoken into the silence, and everyone was looking at her. I mean, does she spew green smoke a lot? Gods, you're dense, Drew sneered. She just issued a prophecy, Jason's prophecy to save Hera. Why don't you just... Drew, Annabeth snapped. Piper asked a fair question. Something about that prophecy definitely isn't normal. If breaking Hera's cage unleashes her rage and causes a bunch of death, why would we free her? It might be a trap, or maybe Hera will turn on her rescuers. She's never been kind to heroes. Jason rose. I don't have much choice. Hera took my memory. I need it back. Besides, we can't just not help the Queen of the Heavens if she's in trouble. A girl from Hephaestus' cabin stood up. Nyssa, the one with the red bandana. Maybe, but you should listen to Annabeth. Hera can be vengeful. She threw her own son, our dad, down a mountain just because he was ugly. Real ugly, snickered someone from Aphrodite. Shut up, Nyssa growled. Anyway, we've also got to think, why beware the earth? And what's the giant's revenge? What are we dealing with here that's powerful enough to kidnap the Queen of the Heavens? No one answered, but Piper noticed Annabeth and Chiron having a silent exchange. Piper thought it meant something. It went something like, Annabeth, the giant's revenge. No, it can't be. Chiron, don't speak of it here. Don't scare them. Annabeth, you're kidding me. We can't be that unlucky. Chiron, later, child, if you told them everything, they would be too terrified to proceed. Piper knew it was crazy to think she could read their expressions so well. 2 people she barely knew, but she was absolutely positive she understood them, and it scared the jujubes out of her. Annabeth took a deep breath. It's Jason's quest, she announced, so it's Jason's choice. Obviously, he's the child of lightning. According to tradition, he may choose any 2 companions. Someone from the Hermes cabin yelled, Well, you, obviously, Annabeth. You've got the most experience. No, Travis, Annabeth said. First off, I'm not helping Hera. Every time I've tried, she's deceived me, or it's come back to bite me later. Forget it, no way. Secondly, I'm leaving first thing in the morning to find Percy. It's connected, Piper blurted out, not sure how she got to the courage. You know that's true, don't you? The whole business. Your boyfriend's disappearance. It's all connected. How? Demanded Drew. If you're so smart, how? Piper tried to form an answer, but she couldn't. Annabeth saved her. You may be right, Piper. If this is connected, I'll find out from the other end, by searching for Percy. As I said, I'm not about to rush off to rescue Hera, even if her disappearance sets the rest of the Olympians fighting again. But there's another reason I can't go. The prophecy says otherwise. It says who I pick, Jason agreed. The forge and dove shall break the cage. The forge is the symbol of Vul. Hephaestus. Under the Cabin 9 banner, Nissa's shoulders slumped, like she'd just been given a heavy anvil to carry. If you have to beware the earth, she said, you should avoid travelling overland. You'll need air transport. Piper was about to call out that Jason could fly, but then she thought better of it. That was for Jason to tell them, and he wasn't volunteering the information. Maybe he figured he'd freaked them out enough for one night. The flying chariot's broken, Nissa continued, and the Pegasi were using them to search for Percy. But maybe Hephaestus' cabin can help figure out something else to help. With Jake incapacitated, I'm senior camper. I can volunteer for the quest. She didn't sound enthusiastic. Then Leo stood up. He'd been so quiet, Piper had almost forgotten he was there, which was totally not like Leo. It's me, he said. His cabin mates stirred. Several tried to pull him back to his seat, but Leo resisted. No, it's me. I know it is. I've got an idea for the transportation problem. Let me try. I can fix this. Jason studied him for a moment. Piper was sure he was going to tell Leo no, and then he smiled. We started this together, Leo. Seems only right you come along. You find us a ride, you're in. Yes, Leo pumped his fist. It'll be dangerous, Nissa warned him. Hardship, monsters, terrible suffering. Possibly none of you will come back alive. Oh, suddenly Leo didn't look so excited. Then he remembered everyone was watching. Oh, cool, suffering. I love suffering. Let's do this. Annabeth nodded. And then Jason, you only need to choose the third quest member, the dove. Oh, absolutely. Drew was on her feet and flashing Jason a smile. The dove is Aphrodite. Everyone knows that. I am totally yours. Piper's hands clenched. She stepped forward. No. Drew rolled her eyes. Oh, please, dumpster girl, back off. I had the vision of Hera, not you. I have to do this. Anyone can have a vision, Drew said. You were just at the right place at the right time. She turned to Jason. Look, fighting is all fine, I suppose, and people who build things. She looked at Leo in disdain. Well, I suppose someone has to get their hands dirty, but you need charm on your side. I can be very persuasive. I could help a lot. The campers started murmuring about how Drew was pretty persuasive. Piper could see Drew winning them over. Even Chiron was scratching his beard, like Drew's participation suddenly made sense to him. Well, Annabeth said, given the wording of the prophecy, no. Piper's own voice sounded strange in her ears, more insistent, richer in tone. I'm supposed to go. Then the weirdest thing happened. Everyone started nodding, muttering and saying, Piper's point of view made sense. Drew looked around incredulous. Even some of her own campers were nodding. Get over it, Drew snapped at the crowd. What can Piper do? Piper tried to respond, but her confidence started to wane. What could she offer? She wasn't a fighter or a planner or a fixer. She had no skills except getting into trouble and occasionally convincing people to do stupid things. Plus, she was a liar. She needed to go on this quest for reasons that went way beyond Jason. And if she did go, she'd end up betraying everyone there. She heard that voice from the dream. Do our bidding, and you may walk away alive. How could you make a choice? How can she make a choice that between helping her father and helping Jason? Well, Drew said smugly, I guess that settles it. Suddenly there was a collective gasp. Everyone stared at Piper like she just exploded. She wondered what she'd done wrong, and then she realised there was a reddish glow around her. What? She demanded. She looked above her, but there was no burning symbol like the one that appeared over Leo. Then she looked down and yelped. Her clothes. What in the world was she wearing? She despised dresses. She didn't own a dress, but now she was adorned in a beautiful white sleeveless gown that went down to her ankles, with a V-neck so low it was totally embarrassing. Delicate gold armbands circled her biceps. An intricate necklace of amber, coral, and gold flowers glittered on her chest, and her hair. Oh God, she said, what's happened? A stunned Annabeth pointed at Piper's dagger, which was now oiled and gleaming, hanging at her side on a golden cord. Piper didn't want to draw it. She was afraid of what she would see. But her curiosity won out. She unsheathed Catoptris and stared at her reflection in the polished metal blade. Her hair was perfect, lush and long and chocolate brown, braided with gold ribbons down one side so it fell across her shoulder. She even wore makeup, better than Piper would ever know how to do herself. Subtle touches that made her lips cherry red and brought out all the different colours in her eyes. She was beautiful, Jason exclaimed. Piper, you're a knockout. Under different circumstances, that would have been the happiest moment of her life, but now everyone was staring at her like she was a freak. Drew's face was full of horror and revulsion. No, she cried. Not possible. This isn't me, Piper protested. I don't understand. Chiron, the centaur, folded his front legs and bowed to her, and all the campers followed his example. Hail, Piper McLean, Chiron announced gravely, as if he was speaking at her funeral. Daughter of Aphrodite, Lady of the Doves, Goddess of Love.